Hello everyone, welcome to new VueJS 3 tutorial. In today's tutorial, we are going to get started with VueJS 3. So VueJS 3 is an upgradation version to VueJS 2. So it is a little bit different, but if you have followed my previous tutorial on VueJS 2, then it would be very easy for you to migrate yourself into VueJS 3. So let's carry on with VueJS 3. So let's start with the starting template. Today we will surely cover all the basic things which are different from Vue.js 2 and how it made a difference to us, and we would or adapt us to those changes. So let's get started with the tutorial. So today is the title is starting with Vue.js 3, and the description is like in this tutorial we will add Vue.js 3 inside an HTML page. That means installation and render the component on front end. We will make a counter app to understand the same, plus we will understand all the basic differences, and we will be able to differentiate ourselves with all those things using Vue.js 3. So first, this is a VS Code editor. It has an index1.html file, and I'll rename this file as index1.js. So it has two files, one is index1.html and index1.js. Now what we can do, we can add a bootstrap starter template to our HTML page for an easy start. So it would be a quick start for us. So you can simply move to this link, bootstrap 5, then start inside the starter template. You can directly click on copy and click on paste here. Okay, so then we will be able to run this page, and if like what we can do, we can like this we can reveal in File Explorer, and when we move to File Explorer we can copy this path and we can move to our browser and we can paste it here, and inside that we have a folder tutorial1, or you can click on index1.html and this would open the page. And let's okay, I'm really sorry, I had copied this inside index1.js, so let me remove this. Now I'll save this. Yeah, so index1.html has been, and I'll refresh this page. So here you can see this the template has started. Now I will remove the title to learn Vue 3 and index 1. So this would be the title, and I can remove these comments. And what we'll do then, simply I'll remove this heading, and now this looks perfectly fine. What I'll do, I'll add Vue.js 3 to this script has been added. So I can copy this script and add it here, and then I refresh the page and I click on inspect. So this would give me inspect and console. Here you can see you are running a development build of Vue. So make sure to run production. This would ensure that Vue has been installed perfectly fine. Now what we can do, we can create a simple app, and first we would also add the index1.js script. Also script is equal to source is equal to index1.js, and then I can close this tag. Sorry for the mistake. Yeah, now I can close this tag, and inside this I can do console.log script started. So this would be perfectly fine when I refresh this page. So here you can see the console.log statement has started, script started. So perfectly fine. Now what we can do, now we can add a Vue.js 3 component. So for that, what we need to define, we need to define a component, and then we would render that component on the front end. So let's start how we can define. So it would have two things. One is the data and another is the methods. So this is this is very much same and how we did in the, or like how we used to do that in the Vue 2 also, but this time we are going to mount the component. Okay, so okay, I'll just show you how you do that. So what you can do, you can make constant. Okay, before that, what you can do, you create a div here inside a body, div id is equal to my app. Okay, now you let this div be as it is, Okay, now what you can do constant my app component is equal to, this is a JSON object. Okay, now what you can do constant my app is equal to view dot create app. Okay, and inside this you can put my app component dot mount. So this time we are going to mount and we would give the ID of my app. So let's move to the page and then refresh it, and you have successfully mounted this component. So when I click here my app, so here you can see a component has been seen. Okay, so this is an empty component, we have not ensured anything inside that, but just an empty component. So I was showing you how we, like in Vue 2 we used to define the element inside the el tag, that element we are referring. So we need to define the id or a class, but here now we mount the component using this syntax, that is view.createApp my app.component, and mount the component, and we store it inside a variable my app. And by default my app component, this is my app component, and the id my app is as the same name is as my app, so that so the view component, so that it doesn't create any confusion to you. Now the second difference here we come is the data. This time a data is a constructor, so that we render the data as on construction, that is on initialization. So it is like a pre-data construction for us, and then we return an object for the data, and this time we return a count is equal to 0. And inside this what we do, we make a button, okay, or we simply print the value of count. So this would be an easy task for us, and let's refresh the page and see. So here we can see the count is 0 and we have a 0 also, so perfectly fine. Okay, and now what we can do, we can make this count inside a button. You called me, you called this button count times. So you called this button 0 times, when we click on it nothing happens. Okay, and we create another button. Okay, before we do that, let's call some method. So methods we call again methods. So methods is a JSON object, good, and we call a method increment, and this time what we call this dot count plus equal to 1, perfectly fine. Okay, now on this click functionality, this should be @click is equal to increment. Okay, now we refresh the page. Okay, now we refresh the page, and what we observe, that when we click, you click this button 1 times, 4 times, 5 times, 8 times, and 9 times, 10 times, 11 times. Now for the same, what we can do, we can create a reset button. @click is equal to reset, and you can type reset. For the same, we need to define a reset method, and this time it says this dot count is equal to 0, so perfectly fine. And when we refresh the page, you called me 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and when I click on reset, it turns out to be 0 again, back to 0. Then I click on it and reset, then it turns a reset. Now what I can do here, I'll show you one thing. I'll click on this, like I've clicked this on 15 times. Now I refer to my app $data. Please look at the console on the right side. Data dot count, it turns out to give out to be the value of 15. And when I call my app dot increment, okay, so okay, sorry for the mistake, my app dot increment, So it says function increment. Okay, now what you can do, uh, you can call my app. This is a function reset. Okay, so here you can tell, you can also look at the functions and the count from here. So this is a very good way, a nice way to call the functions, and this is how we we can have a look at them. Okay, and today we are going to build a date picker and a time picker in Vue.js. So let's get started with today's tutorial. So here I have three files. This is the official website of Vue.js. You can copy the CDN from here. Then you have bootstrap page. Then this is our app directory. So these are the two files, app.html and app.js. So we will be linking app.html to app.js, and then we would build our time picker. Then after that we will see the date picker. So very two important components, and these are very useful when we are opting for a slot scheduling or scheduling of something using a time or a date. So they are very helpful. So we can get started with our tutorial now. So before that, we can move to the bootstrap page. Inside the starter template, we can click on right side, copy. We can copy this HTML and paste it here. You can remove this option too, since this is not needed. And then we can also remove this comments as well, and we can save this, and when we click on app.html, we can see this page is perfectly working fine, and we have a h1 heading. Then after this, what we can do, we need to add the CDN. Okay, we will copy the CDN and we can paste it here, and this is perfectly. And when we refresh this page or control shift I, we can take inspect element, and we can see on console that you are running a development build of Vue, and this is what we needed as per our desiration, that we needed Vue to run a development mode. Development mode is a little bit different from the production mode, that it gives us the warnings and console logs, so that is helpful for us while building an application. But if you want something very much optimized, then you should use production after the development. That should be after the development. Now we can move to our page, and we can change the title. We can change this to Vue date picker and time picker. So this is perfectly fine, and we can add a script below that. Script source is equal to app.js, perfectly fine, and we can close the script tag. And inside app.js, okay, I'll remove this for a time being, and I can simply type console.log. uh, I'll type console.log script started. Okay, so when we refresh this page, yeah, so here you can see the script has started, and plus we have built the page. Now what we can do, we can first create our app component. So this constant my app. So this is my component. Yeah, perfectly fine. This would be a JSON object, and what I'll do, constant my app is equal to view dot create app my component dot mount. So I'll use dot mount for this, and what I'll do, I use dot mount, and I'll use hash my app, and this would, here you can see that, okay, failed to mount an app target, select a hash my app. Well, this would be failure because I have not defined a, I'll remove this heading, and I'll not define a div here right now. So div id is equal to my app, and I would close this div, and I would refresh this page. Now here you can see, and I'll type my app dot data. Okay, I'll put a dollar sign. So till now, what I want to show you, that since that we don't have any data, that would be an empty object, but this recognized as my app. Okay, So it has all the Vue components like attributes and methods. So what we defined here at the line number 7. So this is perfectly fine. Now what we can do, we need to define a data. A methods is given by a JSON object, so that would be empty. We are not defining any methods, and data would be a data constructor, and we need to return a JSON object, and then what we'll do, return a JSON object, and we'll define my time. We can define this as a null component and my date as a null component too. So this is perfectly fine, and let me refresh the page. I got this at error line number though, syntax error. Okay, so app.js line number 5 column number 15. Okay, I had a semicolon before the return statement, so that would one the issue. So let me close this and refresh the page. So I have something good. So why my app dollar data. So now you can see that this is our data, and it has two target values, that is my time and my date, which are initially null. So let's bind them using TimePicker. So now I have input type is equal to time, and then perfectly fine, and then I'll type my time value, but this won't work because I have to bind this using v model is equal to my time. So let's close this page, and okay, I'll put this inside the h1 tag. Okay, sorry for the mistake. H1 tag, and uh, yes, my time. Now I'll refresh this page. Perfectly fine. Now using the arrow keys, since this I'm using Firefox, you can change the time, and then you can change the minutes. Now when I choose AM, this is good, this is AM, and when I choose PM, it automatically changes to 14. When I make this as a change, dynamically updated, and I'll use AM now, so this works perfectly fine. So this is how the time picker works. This is how time picker works, and I'll comment this out now. Since we don't, we'll move to the date picker. For date picker, what you can do, input type is equal to date, and v model, I'll model this with my date, and I'll close this tag, and inside the h1 tag, h1, I'll give my date and close this. Okay, now when I refresh the page, I'll choose a date. So here I see when I choose a date, perfectly fine. I can choose the year and a month. So this changes, and as the date also changes. So month changes, perfectly dynamically updating. So everything is updated dynamically, and this is how we build a date picker and time picker. So today we are going to learn about props and components. So components are like custom HTML elements which we can make in Vue.js, and we can register those components, so that would increase our reusability in our application. So this is a good concept which will you find in other front-end frameworks as well. So this is a custom HTML, like for easiness the components are custom HTML templates, and we can use them. So like not HTML templates, you can call them as custom HTML tags, which we can use them for reusability in our application. And the props is like passing data from parent component to child component. So we would make our own props and component, and I will show you the same. So first we can create a new file, that is index3.html. Okay, so you can create this file, or I can rename this as pnc.html. So pnc stands for props and components, and we can create a new file, that is p. Okay, I'll name this as props.js, props and components.js. Okay, and you can also, like, you can rename this as well, and you can type props and components .html. Okay, now what you can do, you can console.log script added. So this would be like a confirmation for you, script added, and you can create your HTML page here, and inside this HTML page you can put a, like, this is your HTML page, and you can use this. And like, what I'll do, I'll remove this, like, yeah, this is perfectly fine. I'll remove this CSS, this script as well, and I'll give this as title as props and components. Props and components. Okay, now what you can do, you can, at the bottom of your body, you can add a script tag and add a source is equal to props and components, props and components.js, components.js, and then you can close this tag props and components.js, and then you can close this tag and refresh the page, and you have props and components.html, and then you can right click, inspect element, and console, you will see the script has been added. So the script is added. Now what you can do, now you can like, the script is added, now it works perfectly fine. Now we can create our own component. For that, what we can do, we can move to props and components.js, and you can type, first you can type constant app, okay, is equal to view dot create app, and we can close this an empty JSON object. Okay, then we can app dot mount, okay, and we can give this a id app. So we need to define an id app here, so we'll give a div id is equal to app, and then we can close this tag. So then we can refresh this. So view is not defined because we have not added the CDN yet, so we can copy the CDN and paste it here. So let's refresh the page. Okay, sorry, let's refresh this page, and here you can see the script added and the component has been mounted. But now we are going to create our own component, and for our creating our own component, what you need to do, you need to type app.component, because we are registering a new component, and you need to type this as my card. So this is your card, and what it defines, it will have two things. So it will pass a JSON object, and here you will have two things. One is the props is equal to title, and props and is equal to title, and then you will have a template for the same, and you will type a tick symbol. The tick symbol is below the escape key, and you will return div, okay, div, and then you can return a h4 tag or h1 tag, and you can render the title here, title. Okay, so the prop you will be getting from the parent component, you can render the title at here using template. Now let's move to the HTML page, and like, everything is working till now perfectly fine, no error. So what we can do, we can add our own prop. So let this be our prop, be my card. So this is a custom HTML template tag we are using, and this is, and inside this we are going to pass the title hello world. Okay, let's close this and refresh the page. Here you can see I have a hello world, and when I right click here, inspect element, so here you can see, okay, I'll show you. So here you can see that what we rendered there, like what we rendered at, like here you can see that I have a my card HTML tag, but this on conversion turns out to be this, the div id h1 title h1 and div, and the title is the prop. So title is the data we are passing from the parent component to the child. So here we are passing the data title hello world and my card. So we can also pass some more data, that is likes is equal to 25. Okay, and let the date like likes is equal to 25, and let category is equal to, let this be like programming. Okay, so what you can do, so this is the data we are passing, but so far we don't have like we have not mentioned the data we are getting. So we need to define likes. Okay, this likes, so we have defined likes which will be getting, and the category also category. So we are also getting the category, and now inside our HTML what we can do, we can use this. So h1 is the title, then we can have a p tag saying liked by this much likes, liked by this much likes and people, and we can close this p tag. Okay, and then what we can do, we can also give a category, and then we can say, okay, we can give category and type category. So when we refresh the page, so here you can see hello world programming liked by 25 people. So this is a good concept, but how we increase the reusability? Yes, we can increase the reusability. We can create own my card. Okay, and then close the tag, and then title is equal to software. Okay, and let the likes be 50, and the category you can add category is equal to tech. So let's refresh the page, and now you can see we have another card saying software tech and liked by 50 people. So this is how we use props and components to increase the reusability in an application. So this is an advanced concept. In today's tutorial we're going to design a calculator app using Vue.js using the eval statement. So let's take this time I'm using Sublime Text Editor. So this is a very basic component I have created, and this is my app calc component, and like this is a Vue.js component, and I have mounted this on the ID that is my app calc, and this is the calc.html, and this is the ID given below. So this is like a very basic component I've rendered on the front end, and it is very much common to my previous like tutorials how I have rendered them on the front end. So it is very common and easy, and it's very basic. So I've already made this so that it saves our time and we can already get started. We could have a quick start to our tutorial. So you can move to the project directory, click on this HTML page, right click, inspect, and this would return you on console that you are running a development build of Vue. So make sure to use production build. So that's perfectly fine. So no issue. So what you can do, you can make a form, and inside this form you can add. So I'm using Sublime like for this time, like it's like I've already have a huge font size, so it's to give you a better visibility. So now in this you can give input, and then the type is going to be text, and name is equal to query, and the ID is equal to query, and we are going to v model this is equal to query. So you can you can remove this to avoid any confusion, like it's not needed as of now. So you can remove this, and what you can do, calci.js. So now what you can do, you can build query and give empty parenthesis. Okay, now you can refresh the page and fail to swipe direct model. Okay, I made a spelling mistake, so this was v model, and you can refresh this page, so it works perfectly fine. And now what you can do, that I have a data query which is an empty string. I have already mounted this on the front end, and what I can do, I can type for you using the paragraph tag. You searched, your query is this query inside the parenthesis, which would give us the value. So now let's refresh the page, and your query is 2 plus 3 into 5. So this works perfectly fine. Okay, now, okay, I forgot to put an R. Your query is this. Now for the same, what you can do, you can put input type is equal to submit, and the value you can give is to calculate. Okay, and you can give a HR tag below. So this was just for demonstration purpose, like to give an overview, and here it now works perfectly fine. So your query is 2 plus 3 star 5. Now if I want to, if I want to evaluate this query, so I should use an eval statement. So I should use an eval statement, and how can I use this is, first I need to define a form at the rate submit dot prevent is equal to my method. So this should call a my method there in like my method, or you can define this my eval function. Okay, my eval, you need to define this my eval here, my eval, and this is a function which is going to be called, and what you need to do, okay, so you need to define my eval function, and what you need to do, console dot log this dot query. Okay, so first we'll just console.log this dot query. So let's type this. Are we getting at the back at the mounted part or not? 2 plus 3 is 5, calculate, and here we see we have already got the query, that is 2 plus 3 into 5. So we've already got this, so it's working perfectly fine. So what we can do, we can evaluate this using the eval, and let what we can do, console.log, let we should take another parameter, that is result, and we can also keep this as an empty string. And what we can do, uh, we can assign this result, this dot result is equal to eval this dot query. Okay, and then we can, your query is this, and what you can do, simply you can put this is equal to result. I hope this is perfectly fine. So let's refresh the page. I can already copy this and refresh the page. So 2 plus 3 star 5 is equal to 17. So this is how we can use this. So we can now remove this console.log statement. It was just for the debugging part. Now we can store these results, and for storing these results we can use an array data structure, that is calculations, and this is the calculations part, and we can push this result after query, this dot calculations dot push. We are going to define a push function, and what we are going to do, define a query. So we are defining a JSON object, so that this dot query, and we are going to define a result, and this is going to be this dot result. And what we can do, we can also push one thing like time. Okay, and this is date to string. So I hope this works perfectly fine. Yes. So let's refresh this page, and what we can do, we can render this on our front end calculations. Okay, so let's refresh this page. 2 plus 3 star 5. So we are storing this, and this is already showing us the time. Then let me change the query. Already storing this, so we are already storing this calculations. And yes, so this works perfectly fine, and we can use a v for loop on the front end. So for that we can use unordered list, and we can use li v for item in calculations calculations. Okay, so we can define, we can close this, and we can define item dot query is equal to item dot result, and we can define item. So this is calc.js, and we can have item dot time. Okay, so let's refresh the page. We can click 2 plus 3. Okay, 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. Calculations. Okay, I made a spelling mistake. This is calculations. Yeah, now perfectly fine. 2 plus 3. Yeah, so here we maintain the history plus the result. We make another calculations. Yes, we make some another calculation. So this is how we make calculations and storing them in a history. So this is how we design a calculator app, and we can also use the last result, and by indexing, so we can modify them when we click on the last result, so last result could also become available. So this is how we manipulate data in Vue.js, and this is a simple design how we can design a calculator app using the power and maintain the history as well. So you could integrate this with the backend and store this history in a database as well. We are going to learn about form validation in this tutorial. So form validation is a very important part, and we would process the form validation like this is a very important part used in Vue.js, and it is like one of the core topics in Vue.js. So let's get started with this tutorial. So this is our project directory. We have two files, form.html and form.js. I've already mounted the component. So this is very similar. You can refer to my previous tutorial, and it is the very same thing which I always work with the same kind of components, like component has been made, data, methods, and I have mounted this on the ID. It is showing me a small error. You can ignore this error, but if you want to like get rid of this, so inside the head tag you can put meta, this meta tag charset is equal to utf-8. So this should remove this error. So now it works perfectly fine. And at the same time, you can observe that I have now have Vue.js installed. So let me put Vue.js and installation. I would click on version 3.x, and then I would click on CDN installation, then CDN, and then I can copy this link of the CDN. I can get start with the Vue.js perfectly fine. So I can put this at the bottom of my tag, and I can put script type is equal to text comma JavaScript is perfectly fine, and I need to define a source that is form.js. So perfectly fine. Now I can refresh the page, and I can get started with the tutorial. So I'm going to define form validation. So let's make a small form, and we need to define form @ submit dot prevent is equal to check form. Okay, and this is a form, and I've already defined a check form function. I'll define a check form and I'll define three things. One is the name, which is null. Okay, which is null. Another is the age, which is also null. Okay, and another is the gender. Okay, which is also null. Okay, so you can, for your simplicity, you can define this as a vname, vname, and vage, vgender, so that you can refer to this using Vue.js. Okay, and the first condition, what we are going to define first, we will define if this dot vname and this dot vage and this dot vgender, then you can simply return true and at the same time I'll have an errors, which is which will store the errors, and this dot errors. So if this is true, so what we need to define, if this is true, then what we can do, this dot errors is equal to empty array. Okay, and then if what I mean, like what I mean to say, you can, like, okay, I just got a little bit confused. If this dot vname, if it exists, if this also exists and this also exists, then you simply return true. Else you can restart this dot errors is equal to empty array, and if not this dot vname, okay, then you need to define this dot errors dot push name required. Okay, and in the same way we'll have three conditions. If this dot v age, then I'll put age required, and this dot v gender, and I'll put gender required. Okay, so I have put three conditions for the form validation. Okay, and this is, I hope this is perfectly fine. So you must be confusing why I did this, because you don't want to accumulate errors again and again, so that for every condition you need to check if this all the three exist, then you return true, then you put this dot errors is equal to, you make an empty array and you try checking for each condition in this. Okay, so this is how we work, and I have put three conditions, so this looks a pretty clean code, and let's move forward with this. So next, in form.html you can define input type is equal to text, and you need to just vmodel this is equal to vname, and in the same way you can define input type is equal to age. Oh, input type is equal to number, because age is a number, and you need to define this with vmodel with age. Vmodel is equal to this, and you need to define two radio buttons. Input type is equal to radio, name is equal to gender. Okay, and vmodel, that's why I told you to give them a name with vmodel is equal to vgender. Okay, and value is equal to male. In the same way, you can give input type is equal to radio, name is equal to v model is equal to v gender, and value is equal to female. So let's refresh our form. So I hope we are getting all the things. Yes, so we are getting the things, and we need to define labels. Okay, okay, and for that, what we can do, input type is equal to radio. Uh, we need to define a radio buttons. So for that, first for the above two, we can define a placeholder, and for the last one, we need to define a radio. We need to define a radio button. Okay, so for this, what we can give, placeholder, enter your name, and for this, let's refresh. So here you have a placeholder, enter your name, and for the next one, I can give placeholder is equal to enter your age. Okay, now for for the other two, sorry for the interruption. Now for other two, we can give an ID is equal to male, and ID, you can give this a value as female, and ID is equal to female. And you need to define two labels. One is the you can put a break statement here, break statement here. Okay, and you can put a label, label male, and you can put label for male and label for female. So that's how we define the form, and when we refresh, so we have got our form. Okay, now that's like ID is equal to female, label for male is perfectly fine, and when we refresh, so this is working perfectly fine, but I'm assuming that I'm missing with the female label. So let me check. To define a female tag inside this label, that was I was missing. So let me refresh the page. So I have works perfectly fine. So what you need to define, just for the simplicity, I'll define a paragraph, and I'll say you selected your details. So this is just for the your details is your details are v name, v age, and v gender. Okay, so let me refresh the page and I'll show you. This is my name, this is my age, and this is my gender. So this works perfectly fine. But what we if we forget to fill any one, so for that you need to define a input type is equal to submit, input type is equal to submit, and you need to define a value, which says submit. Okay, now what I'm showing you, I have to define errors. So for that I'll give a v if condition if errors dot length is greater than 0, because I need to show the condition on the front end. So how I'll show you. So for that, what you need to define, you need to define div v if errors dot length is greater than 0. This means there are some errors, and I'll close this div, and I'll use a ul tag, and I'll close this ul, and li tag, and the style is equal to, I'll give a style is equal to color red. Okay, and I'll give a v for loop, v for is equal to item in errors. You can give item, okay, or simply you can change this to error, and if you want to change this to error, then you have to change this to as error as well. Okay, your error in error. So let me refresh the page. Okay, there is some property errors was listed but not defined on instance. Error because I defined to do this was error, that was a spelling mistake. So let me refresh the page. So now I hope the spelling has been corrected. So let's go to this part. Yeah, so your name is Python, and if I forget to some age required, gender required. So age is 45, then gender required. So this was, I was doing the same part. This was error was initialized, and if so when I remove the name, I have the age and gender, so name required. So this is how we handle form handling in Vue.js. We are going to learn about how to fetch an API using Vue.js. So what you can do, you can move to the Bootstrap website and click on Get Starter Template, and you can copy this template and you can paste this in advanced app.html. And what you can do, you can paste on this website and you can refer to this. So to fetch an API, we are going to first, I'll give this a title as advice app, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to use another dependency, that is Axios. Axios is very similar to fetch. You can use Axios or fetch, it's up to you. I'll show you how to do this using fetch. So this is the API we are going to use, advice select JSON API. This is a free API which returns an API, and it would you can fetch and advise by ID, and you can search and advise. So this is how we do it, and we will first we will try to initialize, make a simple one, then we can get back to the like how we fetch an API. So what you can do, uh, you can move to this GitHub website, that is Axios. You can use Axios. So Axios is basically used to fetch APIs. So what you can do, you can move to this link, and you click here, and what you can do, you can simply add this script. This is this is access.mint.js. So you can simply copy this script, and you can use this in your project. So at the below you can use this. So Axios is there. Now what you can do, you can also put Vue.js in your project, and you can install Vue.js. You can click on Vue 3.x. So then you can click on get started, and you can click on 3.x, and you can click on installation. So this is how we will get CDN for the Vue.js, and you can copy this script tag and you can paste this in your HTML page. Then we can add our own script tag, that is script, and we can give a type is equal to text comma JavaScript is perfectly fine. We can give a source, that is advice app.js. So we have used both the things, that is Axios and the script tag using advice app.js. We have used both the things, so this would particularly help us. So Axios is used to fetch an API. I'll show you how you fetch one. So let's make a form, then we can fetch the API using Axios. Okay, so let's move with the code. Then first you need to, like, I'll show you one thing. What you can do in this advice app.js, you can do constant my app component, and you can give a data app component, and you can give a data, and you can return a JSON object. Okay, now you can return a JSON object, plus you will have some methods. Methods is going to be one that will say fetch API. Okay, so fetch API is going to be with the method, and what you can do, you can create some data, that is you can create some null data, that is response response is equal to an empty JSON object. Okay, and this is how you will do it. And like you can do response data is equal to empty JSON object. Okay, now what we can do, we will first fetch an API using Axios, and we can mount this as well. Constant my app is equal to view dot create app my app component dot mount. So you can use the mount functionality, and you can give my app as the ID. So in this you can give an div id is equal to my app. Okay, so this is how we do it. And we right now, for just the sake that we want, when we open our application, so let me move to this page. So what you can do, you can right click, and you can right click and uh, uh, open containing copy file path, and you can paste this path here. So this is your JS file. Okay, I meant to open the HTML file. You can click on copy file path, and you can open this HTML page. So this is how we open the page, and you can right click and inspect element. So here you can see everything looks perfectly fine. We are good to go with our code. So Axios has been installed, and now what I want to do, that when I open my application, so I already want this fetch API function to be called automatically. So for that, what you can do, you can use the inbuilt functionality. There is one more thing, mounted. So mounted means that you call this method automatically when your page gets loaded up, or when the component gets loaded up. So we want our response to be displayed automatically as we open the website. So we don't want something to be clicked. So we can call this dot fetch API. So this dot fetch API will be automatically called when we open the page. So for that, what I can do, console dot log we can do mounted. Okay, so this would be automatically called. Let's refresh the page, and here you can see it says mounted. So this is automatically called. This function method has been automatically called as soon as we load the component. So the next, what we can do, we can use some response. So let's see how we get a response from the API. So this is the API. We can open this API, and here you can see that this API returns a JSON object which says slip ID is equal to 116, and advice is equal to one of the top 5 requests people have is that this is just an advice, and with that we have an ID. So let's see how we fetch the API. So let's copy this HTTPS request, and let's put this. So we, if our this API is constant, so we can put this above our code. API is equal to this. So this is our constant API, so it will remain forever for this code, and we could just modify it as well. So what we can do, we can do so we want this function, we want to wait for an API response. So what we will do, we will make this function asynchronous. That is, we would wait for this function to load and complete. If we make this function asynchronous, then we can use an await keyword. That is, await for the response. We need to wait for the response, and for that we would do axios dot get API. So we are calling axios.get API, and if we get an API, then we will have two things. That is, then the next thing we will do, and plus catch error. So if we have an error, so we can make a function to call the error. Error is equal to console dot console dot log error. Okay, so this would automatically print the error. If there is no error, then we would proceed with the then functionality. Then we would get the response. Okay, and we want to do this dot response data is equal to response dot data. Okay, so this is how we do it. And we can, what we can do, we can just simply do this response data. Okay, so let's refresh the page, move to our app, and this is our app. Now here you can see, just for as automatically we load this page and we get the response data. Okay, so what we can do, uh, we can create a front end. So this is how we fetch an API, and we can render this using Bootstrap. So I'll show you quickly how we do it. You can move to the Bootstrap and you can look for cards. Okay, and in this you can copy this, and you can first give an h1 tag, and you can say advice app, and you can give a style is equal to text, align is equal to center. Okay, and let's refresh this. Okay, sorry, let's refresh this and we get advice app. And now we can create a card. We can paste the card here, and we can remove this image because we don't need it. And we can, so we can advice for the day is something. We can call this advice for the day is. And what we can do, we have two things. So this is, we can remove this, and we can give 2p class. So one is the id and another is the like we are. So uh, what we can do, like we have a response data, this is perfectly fine, and we can create two things. One is id, so let this be null, and another is the text, so this should be also null. And what we can do, this dot response data is equal to response dot data, and we can do this dot id. Okay, so let me show you one thing. So we have a slip and id, so we can do response dot data dot slip. Okay, and you can do this as well, response dot data dot id. Okay, I'll show you one thing. I'll not make this complicated. This dot id is equal to, I just wanted to show you, so I kept an empty JSON object, response dot data dot slip dot id. Okay, and this dot text is equal to the same thing, and I'll copy this and paste it here, advice, and I'll put a comma here, and here I'll put id and text. Okay, so let me, I think I have done enough for this, and let me refresh. So here you can see, you get a card, advice for a day is advice number, you get 150, try using an old idea. So this is how you fetch an API, and I have a response this to a card, and you can just make it more simple. Number, advice id, and advice text, and you can just simply, so you can simply put a bold tag around it. So if you want, you can make it bold. So you can also make this bold as well, and you can just remove this response data because we don't need it. And you can style is equal to margin 0 auto, margin 0 auto. So let me refresh the page. So here you can see, so advice text. Okay, let me inspect element, and I have given margin 0. Okay, so I've given I've given this to the, okay, let me remove this and let me remove this. Yes, perfectly fine. So this is how we fetch an API. Advice for the day is advice ID is 198. Sing is the char. So we already get the response from the backend and display it on the front end. So this is how we do it. So today we are going to take the help of this API, that is at api.adviceslip.com, and we are going to make a search feature. So basically we are going to search advice using this simple API. So we will put an input query from the user, and we will be searching the advice using the same. So let's see how we can do that. So we are going to create a searching advice feature, and we're going to take a dynamic input, and we are going to then render the data using the list group of the Bootstrap, and we will see how we can do that. And we are going to fetch a very dynamic data, so we don't know how much data we are going to get, and we are going to render the same. So for that I've already made the boilerplate index.html and index.js. So for this, what we can do, we can create a div class is equal to call md6. Just for the responsive part I'm doing this, and then inside this what you can put style is equal to margin 1 rem auto. Okay, you can give a padding of 1 rem, and for the same this is perfectly fine. And what we can do, you can give a class text center. Okay, you can remove this as no, and then you can give a feature h1, and h1 you can give a search advice. Okay, so this looks perfectly fine. And for this you can give style is equal to text align center, and you can give a margin 0 auto. Okay, so you can also give a 1 rem auto for that. Okay, and when we refresh this page on our, so we get a search advice at the center, and there is already a container which we can't see. Okay, if you want to see the container, you can give a border 1 rem solid, okay, and black. I hope this is a shorthand property, and this would make you show the, like, this is very too much, the 1 rem is too much. You can give like 1 pixel is perfectly fine instead of rem. Okay, now let's refresh this page. So here you see the search advice. Okay, in the same way, what we are going to do, we are going to give input type is equal to search. Okay, so input type is equal to search, and we are going to give a class is equal to form control. And in another way, we are going to another input, that is input type is equal to submit, and for this we are going to give a class of button primary. We are going to give class is equal to button primary, and what we are going to do, style, we are going to give a style of display block, and then we are going to give a margin of 1 rem on auto. Okay, so this is perfectly fine, and we had to put all this input type inside a form. Okay, so now we have already put this inside the form, so this is perfectly fine. We have to put this inside the form, and what we need to do, we had to put this inside a form, and then we have to make a tab, and then we have to do @submit dot prevent is equal to get data. Okay, and when we make we'll make a method which says, inside our methods we are going to build a get data, which is going to be asynchronous, async, because we will wait for the API response, async get data. And for that, what we can do, okay, console dot log this dot query. Okay, but we haven't made the query, and for this query is going to be null. Perfectly fine, we are going in the right direction. And in this we need to define, we need to vmodel this, vmodel to the query at the component. So I hope you all are getting this, because you would be pretty much efficient. So let's we make thing, and let me type hello. Okay, we have an error at line number 7. Okay, let me see. Index.js line number 7. Okay, so this is methods. Okay, yeah, so we are going perfectly fine. Async. So let me refresh this page. So I have an error. Let me check. Okay, the error was that I had basically missed a curly brace tag here. So I had missed that. I'll show you. I'll highlight where I had missed. I had made a miss because this was the curly tag for the JSON object for the return statement, and this was the curly braces for the data. Now let me save and refresh. So it's perfectly fine, and I'll type live. So here you see I have the response live at the backend. So like not so at the component has the data. So now what I want to do, I'll make an empty JSON array using data. Okay, and this is a empty JSON array. So now what I'll do await Axios dot get. Okay, so when I get this, okay, I'll make two things. One is the dot then part, okay, and another is the dot catch part. So inside the catch part I'll simply do error, and I'll do console dot log error. Okay, and in this then part I'll do response. I'll get the response. Okay, response, and I'll do this dot data is equal to response dot data. And one thing I need to mention here, when I move to this, and I'll get, so the slips is the JSON array we are getting. So we'll do response dot data dot slips. Okay, and then what I can do, I do console dot log this dot data. Okay, so let me refresh, and oh, I forgot to hit the API. So for how to hit the API, you can do copy this, and you can copy this, you can copy this and you can put it here, but I'll show you one thing how you do put it. So for this you need to, okay, so here you can see the query has to be this. So what I need to do, I need to define a curly symbol here, and should be this dot query. Very simple. Okay, so let me refresh and let me put live. So here you can see I have a JSON array. Okay, so it says a data. So this is how we get the data inside the JSON array. Okay, so what I can do inside my HTML page, what I can do, I can simply print this data. Okay, let's try one more thing once again how we get the data, but it's going to be very unformatted. Let's refresh. Here you can see the empty JSON array. I hope it's perfectly fine. Okay, I'll do one thing. Okay, then let me put live, and here you can see we get a very unformatted data. This data is very much same we are getting here. Okay, but this data, unformatted data, is of no use if we don't format it. So what we can do, I'll use list group of Bootstrap. So I'll copy this UL class is equal to list group, and inside my HTML I'll put it here, and I'll have only list item, and I'll do a v for loop. Okay, and for that I'm going to do item in I'll do item comma index in data. So data what we are getting, and I'll print two things. Index starts from 0, so I'll do index plus 1. Okay, I'll put a dot, then item. Okay, and I'll do item, and one thing I should make sure, because we had do item dot id or slips. So what do you want? So we want the advice, so we'll do item dot advice. Okay, so this is perfectly fine. Let me close the page and refresh this. Live, perfectly fine. We don't need this unformatted data. So what we can do, this is perfectly fine. Let's refresh and do once again. Let's refresh and we say live. we get the data in a formatted way. So this is how we do it, and this is how we get the dynamic data, and this is how we render in the Vue.js. So thank you everyone for watching this tutorial. I hope this is very clear. Then you can remove this console.log statement, it's not needed, and this is how we render the data on the front end. So thank you everyone for watching this tutorial. So thank you everyone.